Hello and welcome back to League Talk, the podcast all about coaching management and all things League of Legends. My name is AJ, and on today's episode, we're going to be looking at a book. Now, that doesn't sound very interesting. It's a book review. Not really, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some lessons learnt from The Art of Breathing by Dr. Danny Penman and going to be applying them to esports. Now, how on earth do we take breathing and apply it to esports? There's a bunch of different ways, but I'm going to go through all of the different ways that I think are really, really interesting that's from this book that we can learn and we can adapt to. Now, we've spoken a little bit about breathing, mindfulness, meditation, all those things before, but this is a slightly different way of dealing with it, a slightly different way of executing on it, and a really interesting take on a bunch of different things. So, the book, The Art of Breathing, was written by Dr. Danny Penman, who experienced a paragliding accident that left him broken. I believe it was a broken leg. And he was in a very, very bad situation in which there would be no help from anyone for at least another hour or so. So the start of the book talks about how he uses the power of his breath to reach a state of manageable pain, pure tranquility and mindfulness. Now, this is super interesting, where this is almost like a superhuman trait. It's a very unusual one, but an interesting one nonetheless. So we're going to go through some of the themes. So the main theme from this book is just the importance of breathing. You learn that we breathe around 22,000 times a day, so it's easy for those breaths to pass us by. And if not just pass us by, they do no good. There can be vicious cycles with your breath in which stress occurs. It causes shallow breathing, which causes lower oxygen levels, which causes the heart to race and the brain to experience less oxygen. Rather than a more virtuous cycle in which stress occurs, we use techniques of proper breathing that help the parasympathetic nervous system. That kicks in and causes positive and relaxing hormones to come into your body, thus causing stress levels to drop. Now, that's a very interesting one, and it's something that has to be learned, but it's not difficult. Dr. Danny Penman goes into a bunch of different ways as to how we can do this. So the most simple way that he goes into this is breathe in for 5 seconds and out for 7. Let your breath find that natural rhythm of the 5 and 7, and it helps control. It helps you feel in control. It helps you feel stronger. Now, it's interesting because we've spoken about the 4-1-4 method, in which you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 1, and then breathe out for 4. This 5 to 7 version pumps more oxygen into your body, in essence, and more oxygen into your brain. Now, if you look at someone like Wim Hof, he believes that flooding your body with oxygen, even if you can experience certain side effects of that, like you feel very lightheaded, for example, but he believes that if you flush your body with new oxygen, it's getting high on your own supply. That's one of the things that he speaks about, which is really, really interesting. But how do we apply that to esports? So I believe that the 5-7 version might be really interesting. Haven't done a lot of it myself, but I know what the theory behind it is. As I say, pumping your body with oxygen is going to do you good, especially for your brain, with fresh oxygen rather than the carbon dioxide, the CO2 that comes out. So in League of Legends, huge decisions are made. And these are made in moments in the game where you're going to feel extremely stressed. And in essence, they either win you or lose you the game. It could be the team fight initiation, where if you're playing the jungle Sejuani or something. It could be that you need to get on the back line if you're playing Aatrox top. It could be that you have a shockwave not on cooldown and you need to use it at the right time. So these decisions are made, and they can cause extreme amounts of stress before you've even made the decision, in essence. So the moment you start to feel out of control, the moment this feeling comes over you, do this as many times as you feel that you need to. There is no set and rep range like there is when it comes to weightlifting. If you do it 7 times and all of a sudden you feel calm, you feel in control, 7's a great number for you. But it changes every time. Maybe next time you need to do it 10 times. Maybe the time before that you need to do it once, and all of a sudden you feel in control. But do this as many times as you need to feel that control, feel that strength within you. Also, we did learn that when you're making a decision on the in-breath from Sens, that it can increase the adherence, the learning, the dexterity of that decision massively. So just when the decision's coming up, you take a big in-breath for 5 seconds and then push it out once the decision's been made. Apparently, I don't know the theory behind it, to be honest with you, but it's about 70% increase on positive outlooks, positive features of that, comparative to taking a breath out, which is really, really interesting. But we learned that on the last podcast with Sens, which was a really, really interesting one. So do go and check that out if you're interested in that. But he also goes into a couple of other things. Now, he goes into the ideas of worrying, and he goes into the ideas of mindfulness. Now, these two themes are really, really interesting as well. So we'll tackle mindfulness first, and this book has an incredibly interesting way to create a mindful, serene state. It's about experiencing and thinking about the things that you are feeling at that current time, in that current state, which is very, very interesting, because often people believe that with meditation, it's about clearing your mind. Now, Danny Penman, in this book, Dr. Danny Penman, doesn't necessarily agree with that. He believes that mindfulness is not about clearing the mind of thoughts. And there's a quote here that I find brilliant from this book. A great way to think about mindfulness, according to this book, is a full conscious awareness. Now, how do we describe a full conscious awareness? For me, the way that speaks to me is that you're aware of your current state, you're aware of what's going on in your mind, in your body, in your breath, everything. You're just aware. It's not necessarily that it needs to be clear and non-existent, it's just there, okay? So his breathing meditation goes something like this. So you can try it now if you're listening to this. Obviously, if you're driving, probably not the best option. But if you sit in your chair and you feel your feet flat on the floor, your spine on the chair, and you find comfort sitting with your hands on your lap, I want you to close your eyes and focus your attention on your breath. Pay attention to your body. What are the feelings? Do you feel the breath in your nose, in your mouth? Well, how do your hands feel in your lap? Is your back up against the chair? Don't try and alter these feelings and the way that you're feeling with your body. Just have them in your mind. And the interesting thing here is the way that you're allowed to let your mind wander. If you notice your mind wandering, going off into different scenarios, that's fine. Spend a few more seconds on that thought and then bring it back to your breath. He speaks about you being unable, you may not be able to find calm and mindfulness, but it's important to remember that this practice, it can't be done incorrectly. This practice that you go through in this scenario is mindful, and it's okay. He says that you should always attempt to bring your thoughts and feelings back to your breath. And once you've done this for 5 to 10 minutes, open your eyes slowly and notice certain sensations. You might notice that there's birds chirping outside. You might notice that the light is very bright. You might notice that you can smell your family making dinner downstairs. And these are all the certain things that you can go through in a mindful state. The thing to really take away from this is a person whose mind isn't wandering, isn't meditating, and isn't mindful. So if your mind wanders, accept it. Take the thought in, think about it a little bit longer. Spend 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 seconds on that thought. But once you've noticed that your mind isn't on your breath, and your thoughts aren't on your breath, bring it back. I think this is really interesting because I always thought I was meditating wrong. I thought when I meditate that it's not necessarily working very well because my mind is elsewhere. I'd think about the things I'd have to do today and things like that. But it's okay to think like that, and it's okay to experience that. But just bring your body and your thoughts back to your breath. And I think that's a wonderful way to be mindful, a wonderful way to be serene and calm. So that is something that can be done all the time. To be aware of everything that's going on. Maybe do this before your solo queue. Maybe do it before a game, before you go on stage in some circumstances. Sit back in your chair, feel your feet on the floor, your hands on your lap, everything, and just focus on your breath. Close your eyes and you'll be experiencing a more mindful state. This will bring you into an awareness, into a presentness, if that's a word. I don't want to say presence because that's not true, but it will bring you into the present. And therefore your mind will be on the certain things that need to be achieved in the next 10 to 15 seconds, 10 minutes, half an hour, 4 hours, whatever it may be. You can do this as long as you want. He says repeat this twice a day for 10 minutes. If you want to do it 4 times, I'm sure it's not going to hurt. You know, so that's a really interesting way to be mindful, because a lot of people, you know, we've spoken about mindful, and there's a book down here on my bookshelf. It's called The Little Book of Mindfulness, and that takes you through a bunch of different ways. One great way that they take you through is every time you open a door, take a breath in, feel your hand on the handle, on the doorknob, and push through at that point. It just gets you to do everything a little bit slower. Again, when you're typing, when you're playing League, do everything 25% slower where you can. So when I'm typing and preparing for this, I'm typing a little bit slower, 25% slower, just to bring me into that mindful state. But I love the idea that if your mind is wandering, that's good, that's okay, that's meditation. The next thing that he likes to talk about, and I think this is fantastic for him to talk about this, is the idea of worrying. one of the pages in the book says people on average spend 36 minutes a day worrying. I think people probably spend more than that most of the time. But instead of spending that time worrying, why not spend that outside breathing instead? Now, it's very, very important here to focus on a couple of things. Now, for me, my focus goes on the outside and the breathing. He speaks a little bit about something called a scavenger meditation, and where you go into a local park or a little forest nearby and find things in that childish exploration type of mindset that interest you. You spend time thinking and feeling about these things, you know. So it could be that you see a stick or something, or a leaf that looks really nice. Hopefully don't pick up anything you shouldn't be picking up. You know, no razor blades or bottles or anything like that. It depends whereabouts you live and what park you're in. But he talks about these scavenger meditations. I don't think that's incredibly important. I think it's a nice thing to do. For esports, however, we have spoken an awful lot about something called green exercise, which is simply exercising in the outside, in the green. You know, experiencing fresh air, experiencing the trees, the birds, wildlife, things like that on a regular basis. And he speaks to the importance of being outside. So what I want people to think about is to just spend a little bit more time outside, and that mindfulness state. Maybe you sit down in a park bench, it's nice and calm, and you breathe. You do the 5-7 method. You breathe in for 5 seconds, you breathe out for 7. You pump your body full of lovely oxygen and see how you feel after that. I know for me that I need to be outside. It's something that's very, very important to me. If I'm cooped up indoors the whole time, then I'm in trouble, which is one of the wonderful things about coaching in parks and things like that. So that fresh air is going to do you wonders. So these are 3 massive themes that I really take away from this that can be applied to esports, that are slightly different to the ways that I've dealt with things in the past. So as I say, I was more used to the 4-1-4 method of breathing, something I've thought a lot about. If that's not something that's very good for you, if you want to try something else, maybe the 5-7, 5 seconds in, 7 seconds out is going to be a lot better. And applying that to esports, doing that before decisions are made, doing that before the game. When you lose control and when you feel like you're not as strong, that's the time to be doing it. He then talks about mindfulness, as we mentioned, and the really, really big takeaway for me from this whole episode is that when you're meditating, if you're meditating, when you're trying to be mindful, don't worry about your mind wandering. The moment you notice it wander, bring it back to your breath. Don't try and alter any feelings you have. Just be mindful and aware of everything that's going on around you. And then the last thing, he talks about worrying. He says that people spend on average 36 minutes a day worrying. Spend that time outside instead. It's going to be so much better for you to do that. However, it is very difficult. You can't just go, oh, I'm not going to worry. That's it, I'm fine. So have a think about those things. See how we can apply those to League of Legends, to esports. It would be a wonderful way to do it if you can. If you did do any of these, if you're planning on doing any of this, leave a comment. Let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at League Talk Show. I'd really like to know if this is something that was going to be useful for people. I'm going to be trying it more and more, but I've just finished reading the book, so haven't had a lot of time to do so. But let me know what you think. If you've enjoyed this episode, let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube and you would rather listen to the audio, you can find this podcast on all major podcasting platforms. That can include Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all these massive podcast platforms that's done wonderfully through the app Anchor. Or if you're listening to the audio and you would rather watch me talking about it in front of the camera, you can find that on YouTube. The channel is League Talk with a capital E for League, the second E, the last one. So let me know if you've enjoyed this. I would love to have some feedback. If this has brought any value, whether this episode, the last one, the previous one, episode number 20 through to 50, whatever that may be, let me know. I would appreciate massively if you were to leave some comments, leave some feedback. Any feedback is good, whether it's a 1-star review or a 5-star review. So I appreciate you guys listening. I hope this has brought you value. If it has, let me know, and I will see you on the next one.